All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Agenda is approved. How about, agenda item number 4, approval of meeting minutes. So we have meeting minutes for the September 5th, 2012 meeting, October 3rd, and December 5th.
Yes,
So-
Mr. Chairman, per your request, I had created to the best of my ability, September 5th minutes, and then October 3rd, because we didn't have a quorum, as you see in those minutes, I just indicated that on the very beginning of the heading for the minutes there.
Okay, so let's do these one at a time.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and do the meetings for September 5th of 2012. Any changes or comments from the commissioners? I reviewed them and I have no changes or amendments. With that, I would entertain a motion for
November 7th?
approval. Let's do the September 5th meeting
Oh,
first.
September 5th.
Yep, so you have 3 sets of meeting minutes in your packet, and the first set is from September 5th.
Okay.
So you're gonna do one at a time, right?
One at a time. Motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for September 5th.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With that, we have approval for the meeting minutes from September 5th. Let's go on to the October 3rd. This will be a formality since there was no meeting, no quorum.
I'll make the motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
October 3rd is approved. Let's move on to the December 5th meeting, which was our last regularly scheduled
Approved.
meeting. Let's move on to the December
I have
5th
just
meeting,
one,
which was our,
Little addition
Okay.
on page 5.
Okay, let's
Go to-
see. Okay, Commissioner.
Yeah, page 5, the top paragraph, 5 lines up,
Okay,
where the sentence starts with Mr. James.
okay.
Okay, I just want to add what I said, in the previous sentence, let's see, he annexes that property in his property, there is some grammar stuff, and he would have.
Oh, okay.
But 4 roads to access his property, and I said, which lends itself to a high-density development.
Okay. So you want me just to add that to the end of that
Yeah,
sentence?
that's it,
Okay,
that's it.
all right.
Correct the grammar.
Okay.
It takes a foreigner, to pick up on stuff like that. Other
Okay,
than that,
Commissioner
I'm-
Luke's.
I'm good.
All right. I will make that change in the minutes. Okay, anything else, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners? Any other corrections or additions to these minutes?
I'll move to approve.
How about a motion to approve as amended?
Motion to approve the minutes November 7th meeting as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So I think we've approved the meeting minutes for the last 3 meetings. And we move on to agenda item number 5, adoption of the regulations regarding the State of New Mexico's Open Meetings Act. And I believe we have a copy of those.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, and as some of you veteran commissioners know, at the beginning of every calendar year, all our public bodies have to adopt this Open Meetings Act, and that's what this is about. And basically what it does is it outlines when the commission's going to meet, when the regularly scheduled meetings are, when they have to give notice for emergency meetings, when they have to, what the quorums are and stuff like that. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the Open Meetings Act is about, is to inform the public of when the commission meets and things of that nature. And if they have to meet for emergency purposes, it outlines that as well as, when they have to give notice, et cetera, et cetera. So at this point, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I just ask that you approve this resolution number 13-01. And if it is approved by the commission, I will then have Chairman Patterson sign it, and then we will put it in our files.
So we're adopting it, we're adopting the resolution.
Yes, we're adopting the Open Meetings Act as a resolution from the commission.
I do have two questions, just to understand. The commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, when would we be called in for an emergency meeting? When, I'm just trying to understand where we would be involved in an emergency situation.
Probably wouldn't be. I can't think of a
Yeah.
situation, but it's always gonna be the council.
The council that would make a decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, unless there's an emergency variance or something that is.
Yeah.
So,
No, I can't think of a situation. If it's in there, we should try to strike that.
yeah,
We don't need it.
just trying to understand that, but if we don't, I think we should strike it. Unless you, I just don't know.
I guess
I don't know, I
emergencies are
guess-
things we don't necessarily think of, so we don't know why we may need an emergency. when we
Yeah, I
don't.
guess it's in there as a
Open
fail-safe,
contingency.
you know,
I think I would
one
leave it in
never
there.
knows. But
Just in
anyway,
case.
Mhm.
I would defer to our town attorney now that he's here to get his opinion on this, if he thinks it should be stricken from this resolution or if it should just stay in there.
Well, in 33 years in the law business, I've never, ever seen anyone grant or have a need to grant an emergency variance. So I cannot imagine under what circumstances this commission
I
would
can't see
need emergency authority.
Right.
What if there was a fire like Big B building and the walls are ready to collapse? You need a demolition permit and
That would be administrative.
this
Yeah.
is
Be
all
done
administrative?
internal.
Okay.
We would condemn the building in that kind of situation, and it's all administrative with respect to the
Kind of like what happened with the Ox Indian.
attempting.
So what have we decided, to strike it or still just leave it in?
I don't think it hurts to leave it in there.
Yeah, I think you just leave it in there, it's not.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the commission's ability to make decisions either way, you know. I would just recommend leaving it in there.
The other question I have is, on the closed meetings, is that strictly there for legal issues? If something would arise that
Uh,
we need to speak without the public
Yes.
present?
Yes, that's strictly.
And we would, within the agenda, indicate that we are going into executive or closed meeting to discuss whatever issue?
Yes. Yeah, because you are a public body, that's one of the provisions that you would have to follow. And you're also a decision-making body, so.
I just want clarification. I'm fine.
Okay, all right.
So with that, I think we could entertain Pavel's telephone call. Or we could entertain a
Like, yeah.
motion to adopt the Town of Taos Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution Number 13-01, Open Meetings Act.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and take a roll call vote on this. Mr. Perea?
Okay, thank you very much. Chairman Patterson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'll go ahead and read the rules for public hearings before we get started on item number 6. Rules for public hearings. In order to conduct an orderly and impartial public hearing, the chairman will preside and make all rulings for testimony given at tonight's meeting. The Planning Commission members have received and reviewed extensive materials regarding each application before the commission tonight, including the application and all related documentation, staff reports, and any letters in the file either supporting or opposing the application. The following rules will apply. Number 1, all persons wishing to speak must first sign the speaker list and will be called in this order. Number 2, speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the commission. Number 3, speakers representing other persons will be allowed 5 minutes. The speaker must show written documentation that they represent someone else. Number 4, the chairman will allow cross-examination or rebuttal if the chairman feels this is pertinent to the findings presented. And number 5, the chairman will not tolerate shouting or unruly conduct and may direct staff to have any person removed from the meeting room for cause. Number 6, the chairman will then close the public hearing and allow the commission to deliberate the pending action to be taken based on findings presented by staff and by the public. The commission may approve, deny, approve with conditions, or postpone the decision to a subsequent meeting announced by the commission. Number 7, the chairman will then call for the question and voting will take place as to how to proceed on the application. Number 8, anyone aggrieved by the action of the zoning commission may file an appeal pursuant to the appeals procedure set forth in the Town of Taos Land Use Development Code. The appeal must be filed within 10 working days of the decision. And number 9, all cases will be heard on their own merits and do not create a precedent for other applicants. And so, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'll turn it over to my boss, Director Morris, to discuss some of the items under item 6 on the agenda.
Mr. Chair and Commission, these next two items concerning streamlining, and that has been before you before, but it was done in more of a recommendation phase. This has since been taken to the council, town council, who directed that we now proceed with this in a formal phase, which means that we're going through the public hearing process to formally change the code if that's the direction the council ultimately wants to go to. The sign code, which is the next item, you have not seen. Typically, you guys deal with things in chapter 16 only, which is the land use development code. The sign code is in chapter 15, but we want to make sure that try to put this out as much as we can to the community in all aspects and any available forums, and so that's why it's kind of coming before you. And if there's going to be a general trend, you'll see over time that any issue outside, even within chapter 16 or outside, we're going to be using you guys a lot more as sounding board for the community as a whole, not just for land development stuff, because we kind of just want to get it out there. We want to get it out there and disperse this information and get recommendations as best we can. So with respect to the streamlining, what we were doing before, as I said before when this came before you guys, we're looking to get rid of a lot of unnecessary text, first off. Get rid of any redundant text. It's a very wordy chapter. It's like 350, 360 pages long, and it really, somebody got paid by the word when they wrote it. And so we're trying to thin it down a little bit. Secondly, what we're trying to do is step the review process according to how significant those potential impacts are from that application. So the more serious, more significant impacts could be, the more of a level of review by staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission. That was the heart of the matter. So it really starts, even though it starts on page 1, I've tried to label in the little square boxes, like halfway down, generally what's happening with, what are we doing here? This particular first section at the bottom of page 1 is really relocating these particular items into chapter 15, which is building and construction, which is really where this stuff belongs. And so that's just a reference point that we're putting it where it really needs to be. But the heart of the matter really starts on page 3. And it's with these tables that you'll see on the next pages 3 through 5. And what we're trying to do is look at the way that this works is, you can see the original text above in the strikeout. And we really have this particular section under M talks about different kinds of permitted uses, conditional uses, and special uses, and what to do with it. And you'll see in every one of these cases, doesn't matter if you're proposing 100% reduction in a variance setback or a 1-inch reduction, in that it still takes 1 DRC and 2 public hearings for you guys, at a minimum. Every one of these. So what we're trying to do is step that back a little bit. So under residential, that's whatever the residential zoning is. If it's a permitted use, it just needs to go to DRC to be approved. If it's conditional use with changes to the occupancy, and we have those kinds of things, if a use was previously a retail and it's now going into becoming a restaurant, it's called a change of occupancy. We're just sending it to DRC. If the conditional use is a residential type of conditional use in a residential district, we're just proposing that it go to only a single public hearing. If it's a commercial type of conditional use in a residential district, that's probably something that we probably want to at least think about, and so we're recommending that it go to 2 hearings at this case.
Why is that?
Probably because a commercial use let's say, commercial conditional use, it may be a little bit different. If it's in a residential district, it may just create some impacts. We just want to make sure that it's compatible.
Well, I mean, we still have the leeway, we can always extend it to another meeting, but I think it would be good to have the tool to approve something within one meeting, instead of being mandated to go to two meetings if it's something that's really simple and clear, and leave it up to the discretion of the commission to go to more meetings beyond the first one.
And with the Roberts Rules of Order that we use, I mean, that is a permitted thing. So, I mean, if you guys want to table an item because you don't have enough information, or you
Right.
want to bring it back, you do it all the time anyway. I mean, it happens all the time, so.
Right, and if it's clean and there's no opposition, there is no input from any other department or unanswered questions, then why not just still keep it just one meeting?
May I ask how the rest of the board feels? Are you comfortable with that? Okay.
I could see it either way. I mean, this, you know, a good example of that is, what we dealt with, Diamond Finish and a commercial use in a residential area. And it seems like when there's two hearings, it really gives the public a chance to, have a say-so.
Well, the
And that
one
often-
meeting
That
does
often
it.
takes time. So I think, you know, it gives, I think in a lot of cases that we've seen, when there's a preliminary hearing, one or two people show up. And when it's a final public hearing, you know, a community or a neighborhood has more time to either organize or get the word out that it's a significant issue. I think oftentimes if there's only one meeting, that doesn't really give a chance for that to happen. So I can actually see it either way. I think, you know,
Well,
in the cases
sure.
that we've seen where it's, I think, a commercial use in a residential area, I think I would actually give it the time to develop as a case and give the residential community time to have their input.
Now, I can see the opposite with the residential conditional use in a commercial district, where I don't think the impacts, I think the
You're
impacts.
downgrading the
You can
impact.
downgrade. I
like
think
it-
what your philosophy would probably fit
To
in
the-
that
to the- to
scenario,
the
but
next-
with the
yeah.
residential, introducing a commercial use into a residential area you can create some real issues. You
Okay.
don't even realize it.
I see the chairman's point, and I think it's a valid point. And in the commercial, going to residential, I think we could reduce that one to requirement of one meeting, because we're reducing the impacts.
Can I ask a question? What minor exterior modifications would be?
If there's a commercial building that does, by virtue of the business that's going into it, needs some modifications to the exterior. We've had that situation with the infamous hairdresser in the commercial building. They needed a door, I think it was an additional door or something, and so we just want to make sure that it's real clear that certain types of uses really don't warrant the full-blown. That individual had to go through a DRC and 2 public hearings. I don't know if you remember her.
Yeah,
but it was-
on Kit Carson.
Yes.
Right.
And so the idea is just minor changes to a structure, so it doesn't have to come before you as a change of use.
She was a good sport.
Now, the special uses, I'm still recommending that we keep them. Special uses tend to be very intensive kinds of uses. They're the hospitals, schools, cemeteries, mortuaries, cell towers, that sort of thing. So that probably needs to stay, or at least that's my recommendation. Okay?
So far to this table, we just have one change. It's under the commercial conditional use in a residential area. It would be a DRC meeting with one hearing
Yes.
before the commission.
Yep.
Okay?
On the next page, this is, in the middle, you see the table there. This is the provisional permit. This is what is required. You can build by right up to 30,000 square feet in commercial space. With a provisional permit, you can go to a maximum of 80,000. Now, thinking along those lines, if you needed, that's a pretty big range in there from 30 to 50, or to 80,000 feet. And so the idea here is maybe the bigger, the bigger the size of what you're proposing, you need more increase. Again, you can always request that the item be tabled. So if you needed 35,000 feet for a structure, you're going through the same process as something that's going through 80,000 square feet. So this is just a proposal to break it up into two kinds of provisional permits. Basically a little one and a big one.
That looks reasonable.
Oh, yeah, everything.
Okay, because I just didn't see that.
Yeah, the second one might require 18 meetings.
Yeah, and it could, very easily.
Mr. Morris,
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I don't understand the top of page 4.
The following is, okay, this is some language that's in there that says that basically if, and if the process matrix says that you only need DRC approval, and it's denied, that basically it's an automatic kick-up to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
First comment I have is, the following is the process. Are you referring to M, or are you referring to
Yes.
something else?
No to M.
So it should be the above is the process, or the aforementioned was the, or is the process, or maybe that should go before the process itself, right? Rather
can
than
put
saying
some
the
language in.
following.
It's meant to go with M, because that's how it's broken out. There's,
So it should refer to, the way it looks here is it looks as if it's referring you down to below it.
oh, okay.
And then the second comment I have is regarding the denial by the DRC. Is that an automatic scheduling with the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Yes.
Wouldn't it be up to the applicant to make a determination of whether they wanted to bring
Well,
it?
typically, we will ask them, we would request that they would, help me out here, that they would
Yeah.
request the hearing.
Yeah.
But it's understood that as soon as there's a denial, that we would start to get ready for that request to be placed.
Yeah, because basically it would be on the onus of the applicant to do that, because in the LUDC, there's always that ability for anybody to appeal a decision by the code administrator to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so they would just have to follow the appeal process, and you guys would hear their appeal, based on the denial of the DRC,
So
whatever.
they really have a two-tier appeal process, from DRC to the PNZ, and then
Yes.
from PNZ to the council.
Yes.
And that's already in the code, so
Right.
it's automatic. That-
Yeah, it's permitted under the code, the way it stands right now.
Okay.
All right, on to page, if we're okay there, page 5.
I think we would probably make two revisions there. So the top of page 4, the paragraph would actually be placed before the table of item M, right?
Okay.
The
Yes.
following. And then it would read, the following is the process steps for each type of use. If a use needing only DRC approval is denied by the DRC, after that comma, I think I would insert upon applicant appeal, that application would be scheduled for planning and zoning, as outlined above.
Chairman, the legal department strongly concurs with that last suggestion.
Wow. Strongly.
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 I don't think you can force people to appeal.
Good. Glad you're here. Okay, next.
Okay. On to page 5. And this applies to the variance process, which we do quite a few of here. It probably constitutes 75–80% of the applications y'all see, or have been since I've been here. And here the intent is to ratchet up the amount of review based on percentages of the variance request. So if somebody's requesting a variance reduction of between 0 and 5%, it's pretty minor. And so basically it would be to the code administrator. Between 6 and 15%, it goes to the DRC. 16 to 30%, now you're starting to increase the amount of deviations from those setbacks or lot coverage or whatever the other standards are. So we're proposing it goes to a public hearing. And 31% or more, or 2 or more variances. probably should be going to the 2 hearings. The idea is that if you're asking for a couple of different variances, you probably are looking for something that is being shoehorned in somewhere, probably needs a little bit more review and a little bit more study. So that's the theory behind this.
How would that calculation be done?
Basically, whatever they're requesting, you just create a percentage of what the reduction, what they're asking for based on what the actual criteria is. And whatever the difference is, will tell you what the reduction is.
So if it's a 10-foot setback and they're requesting to do 9 feet, then that's a 10% reduction.
And that would go to the DRC.
And who would do that like the code administrator, somebody would supervise that calculation?
Yes, sir. And that would be done by Rudy. When the application comes in, we just follow the process of where it's going. Again, the idea is, if it's just a 1% reduction, is that really creating a super significant impact? Probably not.
I think it's a good idea, just the mechanics of it.
Is there should we put some, this might be dipping in the wrong direction here, but should there be some kind of like catch-all clause for whoever the review person is or the code administrator? It might fall on that 0 to 5%, but it's a unique situation. And it would allow the code administrator to refer the case to the DRC or to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So if I, the code administrator, or at any level, if any particular level, let's say the DRC says this is really, maybe it's still in our ballpark, but probably you ought to kick it up, that they could do so.
Right.
That's an
Okay.
option.
As an option, right?
I don't know if that creates too much discretionary.
That's one of the things we've actually been trying to do is remove some of that discretion, but it might not be a bad thing. I mean, there may be situations where a 5% variance reduction does create a problem. I don't know. I never know, but.
Mr. James, any suggestions on my idea? Just the idea of it?
Well, I've tried to stay largely out of this because you guys have worked with this code way more than I have, and although I have a high level of arrogance, I don't have that much that I would, because you guys have experience. I'm a little concerned about this whole, first of all, I think there should be some remedy that allows this commission to hear one of these if they want to. And second of all, I don't know how the code administrator or the DRC develops the facts that are required in order to sustain a variance if one is contested. So I get that we're trying to make this easier for people to use, but variances require some specific findings, and I don't know how, in the absence of public comment and in the absence of this commission making findings of fact, that this is going to work. I mean, it works fine if they're not contested because you don't have a problem. But if they are contested and there is no finding on the issue of hardship or whether it's economic based or whether it's self-caused, I'm not sure this is going to function very well.
Well, we can put some language in there that points back to the criteria for a variance that's located in the code. There is that criteria, that section that's in the code about what the criteria is for a variance.
Well, and I understand that. I guess if I'm an aggrieved neighbor and I find out that a 9.5-foot tall fence has gone up instead of a 10-foot fence, I might still be exercised by that. And I would like to have some way to weigh in on that before it happens and the fence goes up. It's unlikely you're going to get a remedy out of a court that somebody tear their fence down. So I have some concerns about this. I understand what the goal is. I'm just not sure legally that it works if it's contested.
And I agree with you, Mr. James, in reference to the neighbors, how they can, if they're contesting a change or a variance, if the DNC is, or DRC is the, basically the ultimate decision-making. So I just would like to see some kind of language or how that process, or try to understand that process if there are people contesting that variance.
Well, we could still do this, have the same basic idea, just removing the code administrator and the DRC version, to just say anything from 0 to 30%. You get one public hearing minimum, and anything above that gets two. That takes care of your public hearing concerns.
Well, it's not my public hearing problem, it's the state law.
Well, you're bringing it up.
Well, yes, I'm bringing it up because I don't want to sit here like a potted plant. The problem we have here is contested. And again, I think that the second suggestion you made, whereas one public hearing instead of two, certainly covers that problem. But I think people are entitled to notice. I think they're entitled to findings of fact. I think they're entitled to a hearing on a variance, although I understand that the vast majority of them are probably going to be uncontested. But we have to have a mechanism that's going to survive some kind of legal scrutiny. I don't know what I'd say to a court and said, oh yeah, the DRC did that and you can take it or leave it. I mean, that's not going to work.
Okay.
So
Chair?
item number S, we revise it to say 0 to 30% is a DRC and one public hearing.
Yes.
Next.
Sounds
Okay.
more accommodating.
It's still more accommodating, it's just not quite. The next pages are stuff that are being pulled out all the way to page 15. From bottom 5 to 15 they're all building related, but they're somehow in the zoning code, so we're gonna relocate them into the building permit and construction part, which is chapter 15, so that's all that is. Now, beginning on page 15, the code right now, the zoning code has, and we're a municipality, but we have 4 agricultural zones. I think we talked about this before. 20 acre, 10 acre, 6 acre, and then the basic 3 acre.
Yeah.
We don't have anything that's zoned, anything but the smallest one, which is the RA. And so we're proposing to get rid of 3 of the agricultural districts, which are they're just not needed. Just plain just is not needed.
What
And
was the original legislative intent, do you know?
I don't know why. I mean, we're talking a minimum of 20 acre farm inside a municipality is just, most counties don't have this kind of specificity in their zoning codes.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lee, I might be able to answer some of that. When I first started with the town of Taos 10 years ago, we did have the Extraterritorial Zoning Commission, and in the ETZ, we did have quite a few lots, that were pretty big and were agricultural in nature. And so I think what the intent was to try and match up as close as possible the regulations of the ETZ and, the LUDC. So I think that was primarily why those were in there, is based on the fact that at the time these were put in there, the town was administering the ETZ. And in that area, you did have these type of lots, that would, coincide with this type of zoning, RA20, RA10, RA6, like that.
But we don't have
So-
the ETZ any longer.
That's correct, yeah.
It's not constituted, so it's just not a needed item.
So yeah, let's try to answer that.
So going on to
Thank you for
page
that.
24.
Surprised somebody actually knew the answer.
Pardon me?
So I'm surprised somebody actually knew the answer to that.
You're around long enough.
And the last set of changes in here refer to standards of the plan sets for the applications, for all the different kinds of applications. And what you'll notice is that they're all the same. They just say it time and time and time. So we're replacing that with a pointer that says, here's what the application for your conditional use, your planned unit development, it's all the same stuff. It's pointing to another section instead of having it just repeated time and time again. And so that's really what the last of that is for.
Which page is that, Bill, or is that just?
It starts on page 25 of 38.
Okay.
And when you turn it over, you'll see specifications, a preliminary schematic site development plan. Then it'll tell you all the criteria, how you have to have a north arrow, and then what the scale is, and then it's repeated again for planned unit development overlay zone, for the minor, approved final site development plans for special use permits. It's just redundant, so I've just replaced it with a pointer to one section, and they all point to the same set of criteria. Just trying to thin it out a little bit. And that wraps up what we're talking about here as proposed.
Great job, Bill. Thank you.
And we'll be making, and this will come back to you next month for the final public hearing with those changes that we've identified in here, and then it'll go on to council in February with your recommendation.
So, in regards to agenda item number 6A, we would basically make a motion to move the proposed changes to the Town of Taos Land Use Development Code to a final public hearing on February
6th, Chairman Patterson.
6th,
Yes.
2013.
So move with the, as amended.
We have a roll call vote.
Is this is this a discussion item, right? We don't need to make a
Oh.
motion.
Yeah, it's just
It's a
discussion.
discussion item.
The public hearing will be held next month.
Okay.
Oh, I see the question. The question is, do we need to have a preliminary approval to get it to final public hearing? Or is it just a process deal?
It was my understanding that Mr. Morris was asking us to approve to have this moved to a final public hearing. Is that right?
Yes.
We're streamlining this.
That'll teach you.
Do we need a motion to move these on to a final public hearing? Would you like to have them voted on and moved ahead?
I would
Yes, I
personally,
think,
yes.
Might as well.
that would be the best thing
Yes.
to do,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman and
For the
Commissioners.
record, Dennis.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Perea, can we have roll call vote?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Patterson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes,
Definitely.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so with that, we can move on to item number 6B,
Okay.
changes to the Taos Sign Code Ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission. This proposal is intended to do certain things. One, this document is about 26 pages long, left to its own devices. With the same kind of theory went into this of trying to eliminate redundant text, because it has a lot of redundant text in there. And also, so making it smaller, and actually, when it comes out, it now is down to about it would be down to about 13 pages versus the 26, making it a little bit easier to thumb through. Also, there's a lot of, some changes that are being recommended by the Historic Preservation Commission with respect to signage in the historic district. And so those items are being rolled over from their side into these as well. There's also an intent here to kind of try to put together similar kinds of signage that's mentioned in here in a way that, we have a lot of temporary signage. That we have sections that are just for construction signs, real estate signs, all portable signs, temporary event signs. And so the idea is kind of put them all together in one place, as opposed to the permanent signage, which is not being requested to be, or being proposed for any kind of change at all in here. Permanent signage doesn't change. There are some proposed changes that will, as we go through this, that we're talking about, to temporary signage. Trying to take care of some of the issues that we're starting to hear, and so that's what I'm bringing this out for. But the first part, on page 1 of 29, is just a lot of redundant text. I mean, it's just there. It may be fine, but it just takes up space. The first real changes, as you come through here, are on, and a lot of the stuff is mentioned in other places in the code. I mean, the sections that talk about the penalty clauses and all that. There's several of them actually in the code, so we can point to any one of them. But beginning on page 5, the idea when you start doing this, trying to get rid of extra text, is to actually just go after it. And you see at the end of virtually every sentence is the phrase is specifically prohibited. So if you do that enough times, you actually start to reduce the amount of verbiage that's in that code. One of the things that we wanted to put on the next page is that portable signage is specifically called out to not be any more than 6 square feet of copy area. Because that's on page 6. You see it under our U, that's a new U there. And so the idea is that unless it's allowed somewhere else in the code, it couldn't be any more than 6 square feet. Also, commercial sign walkers was actually something that was in the definition section, and it says it's prohibited, so we just put it under prohibited signs. You know, again, that's the kind of thing that you really want to try to do. The next section in here, non-compliant, unsafe, and obsolete signs, which starts at the bottom of 6 and goes on to 7. Again, it's a lot of words that we've rolled up into these, instead of 3 paragraphs, we've got it down to 2, and it incorporates all those kinds of changes. Okay, on the page 8, and some of this is just relocating again. This is really, that section on 1508.312, which is the last section on the bottom of that page, really talks to single-tenant commercial properties. You got a single piece of property, you got a single building with a single business, and what can you do with it? And so we changed the title to say that. Because later on in the code, there's a multi-tenant commercial properties section, which you see on the next page. That's being relocated from somewhere else. It was buried towards the back of the original sign code. So you know, and when you read this thing, you've got single tenant and then the multi-tenant. Nothing changes on page 9. It's just being brought in. But there is one proposed change on the top, and you can start reading D at the bottom. It's under portable signs and banners. But the actual change that's being proposed will be at number 1 on the top of page 10. There's no limit on the number of signs, A-frame signs, that a business can have. And so what we're proposing here, we're picking a number, is that in a multi-tenant center, each business can basically have 1 portable sign so long as they're separated from other portable signs by at least 100 feet. The premise of all of the stuff that we're doing in here is predicated on trying to enhance public safety with respect to signage and visual distractions and visual clutter. Trying to make sure that drivers that are unfamiliar. Mr. Lee?
If you have multiple tenants in a shopping center,
Okay.
commercial property, like Albertsons, let's say.
Okay.
Then everybody would have the right to have a sign, right? As long as it was 100 feet from somebody else's sign. But those businesses aren't necessarily 100 feet from each other sometimes.
No, a
So
lot of
who
them-
would have is it first come, first served to who gets the sign?
That's the way that this code would envision it. We're not trying to say everybody's entitled necessarily to all the signage every time. If it's first come, first served, the idea is to have separation so you don't have a wall of A-frame signs. And Albertsons, by the way, that particular intersection has the greatest number of accidents in that area along Paseo. Because a lot of the comments that are made in here are predicated on us taking 3 years' worth of crash data and plotting it. Where did it happen? Right. And so that particular area is particularly nasty. Of course, you have a high school coming out on one side, a major shopping center on another, and it's on the main road. So the idea is not to have to try to create a safer passage by eliminating visual distractions to drivers and trying to spread them out a little bit. If that number's, I mean, I'm just putting this out here. That's what you guys are,
No.
have that discussion. But anyway, that's the one change that's different. Let me tell you, you can see the original text is on page 16 of 29 at the top. And originally it said all portable signs must be placed a minimum of 12 feet apart. So there's no number, and it just says that, you can have them 12 feet apart, but not a definitive number on the number of signs that any business can have. And I'll take any recommendations y'all come up with, if you think 100 feet's too far, or if you think one is too limiting. But anyway, that's what we're proposing at this point.
Are you, is there gonna be a sign code enforcer?
Yes,
He wears a big black hat.
yeah, always in trouble. Going on to page 11. One of the things that the on page 11 of 29, Central Business District, these are some of the recommendations being proposed by the Historic Preservation Commission. At the bottom, you see everything that's in underline there. Right now, we only have one building in the Historic District that has neon lighting on its signs, and it's because it has a historic value. And so this would allow, actually this and what's on the top of the next page, would allow for smaller neon signs to be placed downtown, subject to this criteria. Actually, they are recommending, the Historic Preservation Commission is, after we met last, would recommend to take out number 4, not to even limit them on colors, just have that kind of, but there's the criteria. And one of the other major changes that was being proposed is the idea of only for internal window signage in the historic district, or the central business district, only non-lit signage would be permitted. And so that's something that we're gonna have a discussion about, whether that's appropriate or not. The Historic Preservation Commission feels very strongly that they do not like the LED lights in the historic district. They feel that they're cheap, they diminish from the character of the area, but this one's even a little bit more, it's beyond that. It's saying you can have any signage that was lit if it's within 3 feet of the front of the window. You can have further back in the store, but not closer to the window. And we're gonna be spending some time on that one, because when this went to the council, there were some considerations being requested that we look at things like luminosity levels, how many lumens could these businesses have, which presents an issue. It's one way of doing it. It's just I don't have the equipment. We'd have to buy equipment to find out how much light something is putting out. But anyway, that is a question, and that's the way it's written right now for the Historic Preservation Commission. Also, what's being added under C that's different. This particular section came from another part of the code altogether. It wasn't in the sign code. It was actually located in the Historic Preservation section of the zoning code, and so we're bringing it over and putting it in under signage. With the Historic Preservation Commission also wanted to consider the last sentence in that paragraph, basically that right now you can have painted signs in the historic district, but per the code, they're supposed to be painting the product or the activity that's happening inside the building. Because historically, that's what people would do. They would paint, that's just pool hall, bar, dance hall, but they wouldn't be Skippy's dance hall. So anyway, this would allow for it, and so that's, but that now with the changes there. Also finally, D is a request by the Historic Preservation Commission that their A-frame signs in the historic district can be used. They just can't be the big white plastic ones that, look commercial, and the idea is that somebody put some thought into it, make it unique.
Mass-produced.
mass-produced. Now, the next section,
That's kind of a big deal. This section's kind of a big deal, isn't it? I mean, it would change the complete aesthetic feel of the entire downtown area, wouldn't it?
I would think that it probably would. The idea with, especially the window signage, I think that's the one that probably gets the attention. But I think the concern is really not necessarily the lighting, and Pavel, if you can help me out on this, but I think the concern is more about the use of LED lighting as opposed to other kind of lighting. And some of those signs can be, 20% of a window area can be pretty illuminating. Some of the signs down there can really, light up the sidewalk, which is.
That was the concern of the commissioners, that they would illuminate half of the sidewalk.
And so you get a lot more lighting downtown versus the more subtle lighting that you get. The flip side is, though, that you always have your security concerns with too much darkness, and so it's a balancing act. So that area, that one we need to talk about, but you guys, I would ask that you think about it, ponder it, and then really look at that section. It'll be an issue that comes up with historic preservation next time we meet as well.
Yeah, and some of those could overpower the neighboring businesses also with their lighting.
That LED lighting, I think that stuff doesn't take a whole lot. That thing can put out 310 lumens, so,
Yeah, on virtually nothing.
yeah.
And that's another recommendation while we're talking about it. On page 20 of 29, right in the middle of the page, it talks about LED or neon window signs. This is on the recommendation of the HPC, that in the HOZ, Historic Overlay Zone, LED signage is not permitted. So that's one of the recommendations that they would come up with. So there are a lot of those open signs that are all LED. You get them at Sam's Club or other places like this, and that, I think, is the reaction that a lot of the folks on that commission are reacting to. Beginning on page 12, these are all the temporary signs. We talk about temporary signage, portable signage, temporary event signage, mobile signs, construction signs, and then it skips that next section on to page. Real estate signs on page 16. And so, yes.
Unlimited sizes.
And these are all the different kinds of non-permanent signage. And so what you'll find is, beginning on page 21, that those things are simply put under the section called signs that not needing a sign permit. Basically, they're just, I don't like calling them exempt per se, but they just don't need a sign permit. And so they're just being relocated. There's your mobile signs, construction signs, real estate signs, election signs. And we had a little bit of stuff on election signs, but it wasn't clear. Like, when you had to take them down was in there, but not when could you put them up and what your responsibilities were. So we put a complete section in there. There's the temporary event announcements. And so the idea is to kind of lump all these kinds of signs in one section, so you can kind of go down the line and just find it. Now, and if I can direct you to page 22. As I stated earlier, the intent of these revisions is health, safety, and welfare, trying to identify things in the code that could potentially create visual distractions or that could lead to basically the diminished public safety. If people are distracted while they're driving, you don't want them running into things. You don't want them to do that anyway. So what we did was, as I said earlier, we took all the crash data from the last 3 years and plotted it all. And then we analyzed all the left turning movements, which is basically you're cutting across 2 lanes of traffic to merge into the 3rd lane. And a lot of these places, a lot of those curb cuts on those existing buildings don't line up nicely. There's a lot of curb cuts on Paseo. This is on Paseo. And so what we did was went through, and I think this is actually worded backwards. It's kind of the inverse. But the idea here is that there are areas where you don't have turning movements because there's not the curb cuts. You don't have the data that shows that these areas are actually subject to accidents. As I said before, the most common place to run into somebody is La Posta. The most dangerous place to run into somebody is SDS right now, because we think it's because the speeds are going a little faster. People are turning out. It's just worse. And as you get closer to the core, because of all the turning movements, you have a lot of accidents. I mean, that section between Seiler and Kesnell, or all the way up to, Kit Carson, is just, there's always gonna be those fender benders as people try to get into McDonald's, Taos Diner, and all that sort of thing. But there were areas where we identified that said, these don't appear to have that same kind of issue with respect to public safety. And so those would be areas that people could put signs in the right-of-way, subject to the criteria that's listed on the page of top 23. Signage will be located off of any pavement or sidewalk. All signage shall be located no closer than 100 feet from any other temporary signage in the non-safety zones. Such signage shall be restrained to resist wind, but shall not be secured using large rocks or concrete block or any other heavy materials. Signage shall remain in place no longer than 6 hours, and the town may pick up any temporary signage that does not conform to the criteria above. And so the idea is that, okay, there are zones, there are places that individuals, if they want to put signage, these are areas that we can demonstrate don't have accidents, don't have turning movements, and so the concern for public safety, I think, is met. So that's what this is all about.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Kind of hogging the questions there on this one, hope you guys think.
You have the right attire to do that.
Did you look at another sign code from another city ordinance that may have had something similar when you drafted this, or did you draft it, or
Yes.
you did?
I've written sign code amendments probably for 4 or 5 of the jurisdictions that I've worked for over the time. This one, I've heard about this type of approach previously, looking at safety and looking at trying to, that's supportable by data. And so,
Do you have a copy of the safety zone map too?
yes. It's
Cool.
basically the 2 areas, there's 3 areas. One of them is south of Bertha to the drainage canal, and on both sides of Paseo, between basically Cottom and the visitor center. Those areas don't have accidents, and it's interesting, the major intersection there, even though there are a lot of accidents as you'd expect, they don't generally tend to be as bad so far, at least what we can tell.
And then I would like to direct the last question I have to Mr. James. Did you get to review this at all?
Well, yeah, to be fair, Bill has supplied me with this. We're gonna have to have some additional meetings. For instance, getting rid of the rationale for the sign code does shorten it up considerably and also makes it impossible to enforce in court. So we'll be putting that language back. Relative to this particular section, our discussion has been primarily that safety is something that works relative to the review process in the court as a rationale as opposed to aesthetics or certainly content or those sorts of things. So we're homing in on it. I'm not sure we're 100% there yet.
I'm not a constitutional attorney. I think that the time, place, manner restrictions on constitutionality are reasonable in certain situations, and I'm sure they're defined in various jurisdictions, but I just don't know what those are, and I think that's
Well,
probably
it's a
important.
moving target, Commissioner, so if you know what they are today, you might not know what they are tomorrow.
Fair enough. And there is an intent section, but it clearly needs to go through more legal review. 1508-100, page 2. Commissioner, I'm done with my presentation on this, and if there are any additional questions, I'd like to request that this be moved to the next hearing for the formal public hearing process.
Any other discussion?
I have some reservations if council hasn't looked at this in detail to make sure certain legal issues are addressed before we go to a final decision on what's presented to us.
Well, I think from here, if we approve to move forward, it comes back to us for a final public hearing.
And that will be after a legal review.
And the council has seen this. It did go to council early part of December, and the town council directed staff to bring it back through you guys for your recommendations, along with any other places that we can get comments, review and comments. So you're just making a recommendation on whether to proceed with this to the council. You're not making the final decision on this with respect to the actual code change. It'll go to the council.
To the council,
Oh,
okay?
yes, sir.
So I
That's
think,
fine.
with us, we could basically approve it with some direction to basically complete their legal review and bring it back to us for a final public hearing.
I'm fine with that.
The only question, Mr. Chairman, if I might, the only question that comes to mind is it seemed to me, my recollection of the council's action here, reaction, I should say, was that they wanted more public input. So I don't know, literally don't know if there's any schedule for additional public input, if there are any meetings, if there's any, my concern is that we don't want to bring it back to you guys if they're, set it for next month, if that's not enough time to do the rest of the vetting that the council directly asked for, and I don't know, really don't know how that's accomplished here, except my concern would be that we don't set it too quickly, if that means there's going to be some curtailment on additional public input.
I mean, this has been advertised, right?
This one has been, and it's been in the paper. It's actually in the paper this week with, looking for web comments, any kind of, that's why it was put online. Copies have been sent to the Chamber of Commerce. It's going through the historic preservation part of this thing, you guys. So we're trying to put it out there, and we'll work with the scheduling to make sure. If everybody's not completely comfortable with this approach, then we can set it back. We have a schedule. I've got to have a schedule, something to shoot for, but it's got to be readjusted after looking at how well along that review is actually happening. Yeah, we don't want to take this to the council unvetted, but I mean, I can only put
But
out.
how do we get the public to participate if nobody comes?
Well, it's.
We could put up some signs.
Unique and vintage.
Yeah, I mean,
You had your Wheaties this morning.
One page of the sign code every 100 feet up and down Paseo.
Just don't bind it with anything heavy.
I think that, I think it's been advertised in the paper and a public notice has been sent, and I think if we, complete the legal review and send it back to town council, with those two provisions, I think we've given as much opportunity for public input as we possibly can, without taking a survey or something like that.
You said the chambers reviewed it, right?
They've gotten copies of these. Would it be useful, sometimes strikeout and deletion is a little bit daunting if you're not used to reading it. So what I will do in both these cases, when you see it
Take it
next
out.
time, I'll give you
Take
the
it out.
strikeout and deletion and then a clean copy, so you can see how it would read afterwards. Would that
Thank you.
make life easier?
Yeah.
And if you could attach the safety zone map. that'd be-
Absolutely, I thought they were, but I guess they weren't.
I think we can get public participation if next time you advertise, just mention the name Big Box. And
Yeah,
we'll have this room full.
Yelling fire in the theater.
Yeah,
Can we have a motion to approve item 6B to a final public hearing on February
February 6th,
February
Mr.
6th.
Chairman, but I don't know if that would be, if that's,
2013?
if the legal department would have sufficient time at that, but I guess we can
If
just
they
ask him
don't,
to see
if
if
they don't have time, I think we can put on that agenda that we
can continue it to another meeting.
continue it to
Okay,
a further meeting.
all right.
So move.
Second,
Second.
roll call vote, Mr. Perea?
Okay, thank you. Chairman Patterson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes.
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Swazo.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item 6C, discussion of the proposed annexation of the Taos Airport into the town limits of the town of Taos.
Mr. Chair, and Commission, as you just indicated, this is the first preliminary hearing on a proposed annexation for two general areas located out on 64 on the south side. The first is the Taos Regional Airport. The second is a 123-acre piece of property that is located, is town-owned, all town-owned properties, which is the property that leads to the landfill. It touches at 64
To the east of the runway.
on the east side and goes around down and stops just before the Taos County landfill. The process that we are proposing is a voluntary annexation process. It's our property. We're gonna be asking ourselves, it's a little schizophrenic, we're asking ourselves, we'll be asking the council, we'll be asking to proceed with an annexation for this particular area for several reasons. One, we wanna make sure that we're having a large investment in the future, the construction of the crosswind runway for that area. It will be about a $24 million project. What we are going to be needing to do, based on finances, is come up with about $1.2 million that'll be our match against the state and FAA's funding for that runway. We don't have 1.2 million, not easily. And so the idea here is with an annexation, we would generate through the construction process around between $500,000 and $600,000 potentially on GRT to help offset those costs for that. The process that we're going to be requesting to do is basically annex the right-of-way from the north side boundary, just the right-of-way, state DOT right-of-way of 64, from that northern boundary all the way to the airport site. And no county residents will be involved. Basically, DOT would still maintain their control of the road. We're still looking at some of the potential impacts to several of the departments. Right now, we provide fire service out there already to that whole area. So the other departments that would potentially be impacted would be police, because they would have to respond to accidents all the way out there, and also the road department. What other requirements are going on? We've done an analysis preliminarily of the state statutes, and I'd like Mr. James to talk to you about that a little bit. I don't mean to put you on the spot. But,
Want me to do it now?
yeah, go for it, please.
Good. Anyway, we're gonna use NMSA 3-7-17, which is a petition method. And Bill's exactly right. It's essentially the town asking the town to annex part of its property. Been in discussion with the Department of Transportation, and I would have thought that this would have come up sometime in the history of New Mexico. Apparently, our request to annex the right-of-way along the highway is a case of first impression for them. They have not had this they have not had this request before, and they're mulling on it. They don't see any particular reason not to do it. There are millions of dollars worth of grants involved here, some of which actually come from the Department of Transportation. So this is a legal process that we used rather than the Boundary Commission process, because we thought it would be quicker to allow us to recapture some GRT from the construction projects at the facility, which will then allow the town to pay its share of the cost of these grants, even though he has some substantial grants. They do require a 5% match. Unfortunately, with the reduction in GRT, because of the reduction in economic activity generally, the only way the town has to generate that 5 points is to capture for the first time the GRT on the construction projects. So it is a consent process. Talked to the Department of Transportation 2 or 3 times this afternoon via email. They haven't figured out why they wouldn't do this, so I would expect that they will consent to it. That's the information I have at this point. If they do, I expect the town will consent to it, since it's to the town's benefit, and that this would proceed in time to have the annexation process completed before construction at the airport begins, allowing for us to capture that GRT. That's the legal scenario.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris, what kind of zoning are we gonna propose for the airport? Is it gonna be a mixture of various zonings, or?
We would probably start out with an M1 right now, just because that's really what you have out there. You have a lot of semi-industrial stuff. It's about as close as we've got to anything else. We are also in the process of doing a preliminary master plan in-house for the airport. Looking long-term, working with the Airport Advisory Committee on what they would think would go out there. Because when we have this new crosswind runway in place, you'll be allowing bigger jets to come in, bigger aircraft that has impacts potentially on fuel sales. If you have bigger jets that are able to come in here, there's potential to do more hangars, rentals of hangar space out there, and other kinds of those kinds of uses. FAA is a little particular about, you can't just put anything you want at an airport, but you can work with them to get other kinds of somewhat related, it's supposed to be FAA related type of uses out there. So aircraft mechanic stuff, we'll be looking, we're going down that list now, whether there's thought of someday, if you have this crosswind and you can get all the components put into place, you can get what's called a Part 139 airport. Once you have a 139 designated airport, you're eligible for scheduled air service. And, that opens you up to either, and the best thing, maybe in some ways, would be a depot, an airplane-based depot kind of operation, the UPS kind of thing, one of those. There's room out there, but there's a lot of things that have to go into this. And one of the other things that we're concerned about is trying to maintain our own land use protection on this same area. Because, this is out in the county, and so as these airplanes, or as the flight paths develop, we're gonna try to work with the county to try to create safe zones, because you don't want certain kinds of uses located right under your flight path. It's bad to put things that congregate people together in one place that's at the end of, if there's a potential crash or something like this, they have specific rules, but we'll be working, that's more long-term. Immediate right now is try to annex these 2 areas and do so as quickly as we can. They're in the design stage right now for that runway, and construction will be sometime, I guess, in the summer. I think that's what I've heard, or at least maybe late summer to start. So we want to get that done now.
So on this item, this would actually come back in front of us as a formal request for annexation.
Yes, sir.
This won't come back next month as a final public hearing. This is just for discussion.
Right, I would agree with that. Because there's no resolution to push forward.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
With that, think we can move on to final public hearings.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under final public hearings, on item 7 on the agenda, we have case number SUB 2012-1. Isaac Red Deer Creek Ranch LLC property owner, Alex Zabeta agent, are requesting a final plat approval on a proposed 3-lot Class B subdivision. The 4-acre subject property is located at the southwest corner of the intersection of Bertha and Deal Lane and is zoned M1 Light Manufacturing. And Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, For your information and the information of the public, I'll go ahead and read staff's recommendations on this final plat, and I'll read them verbatim from my staff report. Staff recommends that the applicant's request for final plat approval on the proposed three-lot subdivision be approved with the following conditions. Number one, the agreement to complete the infrastructure will need to be finalized and approved by the Town of Taos Town Attorney prior to the Planning, Zoning, and Buildings Director signing the final plat for this three-lot subdivision. Number two, the applicant will need to modify the final plat to indicate the owner of the existing natural gas lines next to the subject property. Additionally, under the approval section of the submitted survey plat, P&M Gas Company will need to be removed and be replaced with New Mexico Gas Company to reflect the name of the current utility company that is providing natural gas services to the Town of Taos. These modifications must be completed prior to the Director of the Planning, Zoning, and Buildings Department signing the proposed final plat. And number three, prior to the Director of the Planning, Zoning, and Buildings Department signing the final plat, the applicant must pay an in lieu fee to the Town of Taos in place of dedicating open space within the proposed subdivision as required by section 16.20.090 of the Town of Taos Land Use Development Code. And finally, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, number four, the applicant will need to submit an irrevocable, unconditional bank letter of credit that meets the approval of the Town of Taos Town Attorney prior to the Planning and Zoning Buildings Director signing the final plat of this proposed subdivision. So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I stand for any questions at this time.
Any questions for Mr. Perea?
I have a question.
For Mr. Perea?
Mr. Perea, why do you need the condition number one? I mean, without the infrastructure being installed, it's another functioning subdivision, there's no final sign-off. Why those extra steps when the safeguards of completing the infrastructure are built into the process of the
I think it's stating
developing?
that there's an agreement to complete the infrastructure, not
Yeah.
actually complete the infrastructure.
Yes.
No,
That
no,
way
I
at the
understand-
time-
No, I
yeah, that way,
understand that, but why is it necessary?
It's necessary because at this time, you know, they have no plans to, they don't have, it's my understanding, and the applicant's agent can correct me if I'm wrong, but they don't have any of the lots sold right now. So it's at this time, you know, that agreement will be in place, so when these lots
Okay, I
are,
get it.
individual
Okay,
lots
it's
are sold.
timing issue.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes. That's
Thank
the
you.
reason for that.
Any other questions for
One
Mr.
more
Perea?
question. How is that in lieu of fee calculated?
It's calculated, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Suazo, it's calculated, what has to happen there is they would have to go to our open space fee ordinance. And basically how that's calculated is you take 50% of the, in fact, let me go ahead and read that to you here. I have that available here for reference. What it is you base the open space fee on the valuation of that part of the property that you're going to be, you know, calculating the fee on, based as if it were an agricultural use. So, in other words, you wouldn't evaluate that property, the fee based on the M1 zoning, but you would evaluate it based on as if it were agricultural type of zoning. And let me go ahead and just read that particular section to you, and maybe that'll help you a little bit better than me just trying to ad-lib that particular section. So let me see here. Let me find that real quick. Here it is. The purpose of this section is to develop public parks, trail corridors, and usable private open space that meets the needs of new development and the community for recreational opportunities and visual relief. And then what it does here is, I'll just read that section on how they calculate it. As a condition of approval of subdivision, site development plan or building permit issuance, whichever occurs first after adoption of the ordinance establishing in lieu fees, the developer shall be required to publicly dedicate and or privately reserve 10% of the development site, or alternatively to pay a park dedication reservation in lieu fee. And then it also talks about here the calculation. It says it shall be equal to 50% of the fair market value of the area of land which would otherwise be required to be dedicated or reserved. 10% of the site less a credit or any area less than the 10% that is approved by the town for dedication or reservation. And basically what it says is, in order for this to be, to calculate this fee, you would calculate it based on, as if the property were, an agricultural use. And it's kind of a long, complicated, calculation here, Commissioner Suazo, if you'd like, I
Does it need
can.
a current appraisal
Yes, they would need a current appraisal.
that's provided by them?
Yes, that's provided by them, and then what they would have to do is, based on that appraisal, they would have to calculate that open space fee based on this formula that I just referenced under 16.20.090.3 and 16.20.090.4. They would have to use those formulas, and they would have to, cut out a check to the town of Taos for that amount prior to my boss signing the plat. And it's just because the applicants at this time are not willing to dedicate any of their space within this proposed subdivision, for public use. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, commissioners, for me?
Nobody has any further questions for staff? I think we can hear from the applicant. Mr. Abeta, would you please state your name?
Okay.
Alex Abeta?
Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abeta. Please
Thank you,
proceed.
Mr. Pereira,
Thank
Mr.
you for
Chairman,
joining us this evening.
Commission members. We've read the staff report and we concur with the 4 conditions of recommended approval, and we have no other comments. Those stand for questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
I have questions. Why not 4 lots? Why 3?
3
Is that a cutoff because you would get into a different type of subdivision or
not
different
necessarily,
standard?
3 is because there might be a need for someone out there wanting a larger lot. We could have done
Sell
4
'em too.
lots. Then we sell them 2, then they gotta
Right.
come and do a lot line adjustment, so we figured it's easier to do 3, and we're providing 2 1-acre lots and 1 2-acre lot.
Yeah, no, just
Yeah.
curious.
There's no doubt that the 2-acre lot could someday become 2 1-acre lots, but that wasn't the plan.
Okay, and are you gonna reflect in your drawings, subsequent to Mr. Espinosa's letter, are you gonna include the changes from the 17-inch culverts to the 18 and 20-inch culverts?
I did not get to see Mr. Espinosa's email that I believe he did on Friday or Monday, but
Yes.
if he's talking about going from 18 to 20.
18 to,
culverts,
both
that's not a
entrances,
problem.
both entrances going to 20-inch.
That's
Yeah.
not a problem.
So you're gonna reflect that on your
We can make those conditions
on
of
your
approval.
terrain, on the, your drainage plan, and I think there was another one where it showed. Okay,
Yeah, and we do have in our engineer estimate the paved turnouts at both intersections. So the only thing we had different is I believe we had 12-inch culverts and one's 20-inch culverts. So those can be conditions of approval.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Don't have any other questions. I think we can close the public hearing.
Well, anybody else?
We should check and see if anybody signed up to speak on this.
Shall subdivisions are just straightforward.
Makes it easier.
Counting ones out this way.
It's gonna get better.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, nobody has signed up to speak on this particular subdivision request.
With that, I think we can close the public hearing. And we can either have discussion from the commission or entertain a motion for approval, denial, or continuance.
I can make a motion if there's no
further
discussion.
Entertain a motion?
Move to approve subdivision 2012-1 based on findings of facts, staff recommendations, and indicating the size of culverts requested by the Public Works Director.
Okay, second.
Roll call vote, please. No other discussion? No No other discussion, roll call vote, Mr. Graham?
Okay. Chairman Patterson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Lukes,
Yes.
Commissioner Garcia,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Yes.
Commissioner Suazo.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Beta.
Thank you.
I lost my agenda. Here we go. Let's see, so final public hearings are closed. We move on to agenda item number 8. Is there any further matters from staff?
No, Mr. Chairman, there's no new items from staff that I'm aware of. I don't know if you have anything. Okay.
Item number 9, any further matters from commissioners?
I do have one, just wanting to know the status of potential commissioner come on board, have gotten applicants and where that process is at.
We are in the process. We've advertised in the newspaper, put some blurbs in there, trying to get some names. I do have 1 or 2 names in now, and we'll do our internal thing and send a couple of recommendations to the mayor. Also, I believe there'll be 2 or 3 of you coming up for reconsideration by the council. Your terms are, you're new. I'll be talking to whoever those are. I don't have it in the back of my head right now. Just seeing if you'll still be interested. Can I just ask? Y'all
Sure.
still be interested in staying?
Sure.
Sure.
Still staying? You're interested in maintaining your presence on the planning commission? Okay, thank you.
In terms of the recommendation for an additional commissioner, that basically, that comes from town council.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes.
So
The mayor
they
submits it
basically-
for,
They
To the
basically
council.
have to review the applications and make a recommendation, and that would come back to us.
yes.
Sooner the better.
They make the
Right.
appointment, not only recommendation, they make the appointment, right?
Yeah. Okay.
I'll
So
see
we
what-
have 1 or 2 vacancies,
Just one,
just Ted's.
yes.
Move for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Move in a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye,
And
aye,
there we
aye,
go.
aye.
First meeting of the year.
Happy New Year to
Hello,
everyone.
everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody.